Hey guys, I'm Nicole Herrick and today I'm going to show you how to make some basic box cushion covers. Now, if you have never heard of me, hey, I'm Nicole, and you should probably consider subscribing because if you like DIY and making stuff yourself, then you're going to love my channel. Also, don't forget to hit the bell and then you'll get notified when I actually upload a new video. I try and upload every 1 to 2 weeks and give you guys a little bit of a helping hand in figuring out how to do stuff. Just, you know, stuff. All right, let's go make some box cushions. So I know this tutorial is just making the box cushion covers, but here's a little tip to get some free foam because foam can be really expensive. Have a look on your local Facebook marketplace, Craigslist, Gumtree, that kind of thing. There is always some free foam mattresses being thrown out. Just make sure that they are non-stinky. Okay, so the first step in making the box cushions is to remove any cats from your table. It's not an essential step, but it does make things a little bit easier. Now let's measure up each of our cushions that we're going to make the covers for. So this is a really long outdoor cushion. So I'm measuring the length, the height, and the width. And I'm just writing those down and I'm going to create a cut list for this one. So I've got my actual measurements of the exact cushion right here. So I need to add the seam allowance to each edge of my pieces. So I'm going to use a 1 centimeter seam allowance. You might use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, but whatever you use, just consistently add it to each edge. So you can see that I've got, for my top piece, I've got 183 by 94. So that becomes 185 by 96. So I've added 2 and 2, and that's 1 centimeter seam allowance on each edge. So this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge. I hope that makes sense. So you can see I've got 2 off because that's my top piece and my bottom piece. We come down here and I've got my 2 side pieces down here, so 2 off. And then I've got my front piece is down here, so just one of the front piece. And then in the back, I'm going to put the zip. So we need to make that a little bit wider because we're going to put the zip in the center of that. And we're actually going to cut it down the center. So I've added 6 centimeters or 6 times your seam allowance to that one, just so I've got that little bit of extra room to fold under so that I can stitch that zipper in. Another little tip is to write the measurements of each piece on the back after you've cut them. That way, once you sort of put them down somewhere and forget which is which, you can just look at the measurements and double check your cut list to figure out what you need to sew next. When sewing thick or waterproof fabrics together, it's definitely advisable to use a walking foot. If you don't already have one of these, it's definitely worth investing in one, even just for this. I think mine was $20 or $30, 22 I think. I will link below where I got this from on eBay. It is an off-brand one, it's not a brother, but it works perfectly fine. So the walking foot basically has teeth on it that help push that top layer of fabric through. So they're just like the feed dogs that are on the underneath layer. It's like having feed dogs on the top layer, so everything just glides through the machine beautifully. The walking foot helps with many different fabrics, so stiff ones like this that are really, really thick. You can sew like lots of layers together, or even for stretch fabrics where the foot keeps pulling on the top layer of fabric and stretching everything out and you get those wavy seams. This will stop that from happening. So let's get started sewing with our back piece with the zipper in it. I've got it in one whole piece at the moment, but what we're going to do is fold it in half lengthways. And I've actually allowed a 2 centimeter seam allowance in the middle here. That's because with putting a zip in, it's just better to give yourself a full 2 centimeters on either side because it's quite a big zip and it just makes it a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is fold this in half and then I'm going to stitch 2 centimeters all the way down, so making sure I keep that nice and exact. And then I'm going to cut this seam open, lay it out flat, and we'll put the zip in. So I've got my 2 edges here. This is the folded section here. I want to measure exactly 2 centimeters in and mark that. And then I'm going to find where my edge is going to be for that. So, all right, if I have my needle on the left here, you can see that my little 2 is just here, and that means that is 2 centimeters. So I'm going to keep the edge right on my 2 centimeter line the whole way down. And I'm going to use a long stitch in this because we actually pull this long stitch out when we're finished. Okay, so just a long stitch, no back stitching or anything, just one long stitch. So there we have our 2 centimeter long stitch down here. Now I'm just going to cut this all the way up the side. All right, so now that I've got that cut up the middle, we're going to open that out, wrong side towards us, and we're going to flatten that seam down. Just go to a table and just run your hand along it, and it will sit nice and flat. And I also just want you to double check that this length matches exactly your other depth piece. So I've got my other depth piece right here. Okay. Then I can see they are now the exact same width. All right, so let's grab the zip. I have my zip here, and I am going to face it down onto my open flap. So this is the wrong side of the fabric, and then this is the right side. This is the right side over here. And then I'm going to pop this over and just extend it a bit. So I've cut my zipper sort of extra long, just so that I can kind of keep this out of the way, and just I will pull that back down later and then cut off the excess. But for now, I just want to get it out of the way so it's easy to stitch. So let's pop this here. So what I need to do is make sure that this center line is perfectly along this center line. So I'm just going to have to keep checking every few minutes and just make sure that it is bang on center. I can feel the zipper is right here, and then my needle is over here on the left, so it's just going to be catching this edge of the zipper, and that is totally fine. So I'm going to do a back stitch here. You're not meant to back stitch on a this foot, but you know, whatevs. All right, let's make sure that it's perfectly in the center, and let's go. Okay, so I'm coming to the end here, so I'm just still making sure that I am really nice and in the center. I'm going to come down to here, stop my needle, turn the fabric, stitch across here, and then we're going to go down the other side. We're just going very slowly. Too far, Nicole, too far. All right, and then let's spin around the rest of the way. Okay, and I'll just stitch down the other side. So now what we want to do is turn this over, and we can, option 1, just pop a seam ripper in there and just and rip it all down the middle. That just means you have to pick out all of the little individual threads that you've cut. Or alternatively, what you can do is see if you can pull this thread. And the idea there is to pull one entire thread out and then the other. Not going to work because my fabric is so stiff. So we are just going to gently pop our seam ripper in here, hold onto the zip, and just push down. There we go. And I'm just going to go all the way down. And then we have a beautiful, perfectly meeting flapped zip. Can you see that? Open that up. And then as I zip it back up, those meet absolutely 100% perfectly. Now we're going to start joining our side, front and back piece to our top piece. So the big piece there in the center is the top piece. The shorter little piece there is my side piece, and this piece that I'm pinning on or pegging on right now is the front piece. You're going to do this for all of the 4 edges. Now you might be asking yourself, why isn't she sewing up all of those side pieces together first? Well, the reason is because sometimes when you're using other fabrics, they tend to stretch, even if it's a just woven fabric. So doing it this way, you know you're always going to get that corner exactly perfect. So you'll need to measure in 1 centimeter in and then start sewing from there, or whatever your seam allowance is. This is because it's a corner and all the corners eventually meet. When you're coming to the edge, make sure you stop 1 centimeter or your seam allowance before the edge. And I just mark that so it's exactly perfect. So the next bit I'm just going to have to talk you through because I accidentally missed filming it. But what you need to do now is fold that top section back just 1 centimeter. So I'm talking about the side section that is your top layer of fabric right here. And then you want to leave your needle in, turn your fabric 90 degrees, grab the next thin section that you're going to be adding, line that up with the corner, and then start stitching 1 centimeter from the edge yet again. And just keep doing that all the way around until you get to here. So you want to make sure you stop 1 centimeter from the end here, and we already did 1 centimeter from the end over there, and we're going to clip that. Clip on that side, and then we're going to clip our 1 centimeter over here as well. Okay, and then that, oh hello, excuse me, would you like some dinner? What you're waiting for? All right, and then that allows us to push those flat so that we will be able to stitch and make that perfect corner. But first we're going to join our bottom piece of the cushion cover to those side pieces exactly the same as we did our top piece, and leaving that 1 centimeter gap at each edge. Okay, so I'm up to doing my corner of my side seam. You can see I have one corner on this side and another corner on this side. So all we need to do now is just fold our pieces so that they sit nice and flat. And so you can see this is the exact point here that I want to start stitching, coming down. And you can see I've just pulled my sides, sorry, my top and bottom out on an angle so it's easier to stitch. Let's make absolutely sure that we are perfectly on that mark. Beautiful. And I know they say not to go backwards with a walking foot, but I did it. And then we have our perfection seam. Also, when you get to sewing that corner seam where the zipper pull is, before you sew that seam together, make sure you unzip the zipper about sort of 2 to 3 inches so that you can actually get your hand in there to unzip it later on and turn the whole thing inside out. So now let's do a test fit on our cushion. So I'm still inside out at this point, and I'm just putting that corner exactly where it needs to go, and then I'm peeling it down over. Obviously, if you're using a nice soft cotton fabric, this will be a lot easier, but this stiff waterproof stuff is very difficult to maneuver, so I recommend having somebody else there to help you. And also, I don't actually include this sort of in the video because I'm not talking about making the cushions themselves, but you should use a thin layer of wadding over all of your foam, even when it's just a piece that you're sitting on. And then when you're making back cushions, or backrest cushions I should say, you should use a thicker wadding, or I like to use old doona covers because they're much cheaper than wadding. Now that you are absolutely certain it fits perfectly, it's time to top stitch. So we're going to be moving the seam allowance to one side. Don't split the seam allowance down the middle and top stitch. Moving it to one side makes it a stronger join. Now I could only sort of do some of the seams with this, so I kind of stuck to that front edge just because this fabric was so stiff and crazy to try and get through my sewing machine. But if you're using a cotton or canvas, try and top stitch every seam.